Alright, here we have a 2012 Volkswagen GTI, and it's throwing a check engine light, a flashing check engine light, and we're going to look into what the problem is. So I'm just going to use a standard OBD2 tool to scan the engine code. So all we do is plug it in under the dash. Let's see if we can get you a better look. So the scanner, relatively simple, that you can get really anywhere. Just looks like this. It's pretty easy to operate. Let's start the car. You can hear the car misfiring. Doesn't really want to rev. It's already found a code, and we'll go ahead and read that. And it looks like we have a cylinder 4 misfire. I can get you a better look. So cylinder 4 misfire. That's repeated, and there's also cylinder 2 misfire. Very often these codes are the result of a bad ignition coil, and that's probably what's happening here. So that's what we're going to do today, replace the coils and plugs while we're at it. So let's get to work. I'm going to go ahead and erase the codes. It says erase is done, and let's go ahead and get to work. This particular car has a couple of modifications on it. As you can see here, it's got a aftermarket intake. It also happens to be chipped or tuned, if you will, for a little more performance. This is a pretty straightforward job. The engine cover needs to be removed. That's the first step. You just pull up and detach from its mounts. Pretty simple. So there's 4 mounts, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and this is just a sound insulation. So we'll go ahead and set this here. And then you have a few tabs on the ignition coils, and you pull those back and remove it, which is pretty simple to do, as you can see. It looks like this one's already been pulled or broken at some point, and that's the last one. There you go, pretty simple. And these coils will literally just twist up. Pretty easy to do. And these fail very, very often. Super common failure. We used to see these at the shop repeatedly. Sometimes they're a little more stuck than that. Alright, we'll set these aside and replace them. Here I've actually got a set of coils and plugs. Doing an OE replacement on these. Alright, let's go ahead and unbox everything, get our parts ready. So this is just a standard replacement Bosch coil. These would be the updated part numbers, if you can see that. So this part has been updated several times. They are failure prone. This is a similar coil to what's used in all sorts of other cars. Porsches, super common failure again. I'm just putting the old coils in the box, which I will recycle. Let's go ahead and do that. Again, same coil. Just going to have 4 of these, obviously. It's a 4-cylinder car. There's our coils. I will go ahead and get the plugs ready as well, and I'm replacing them with NGK Laser Platinum, which is what was recommended. This is the OE plug, and the only difference between this and what we will pull from the car should be that these are not labeled Volkswagen, since we did not purchase them from a dealer. However, they are the OE plugs. They should be exactly the same as the plug you would get from the dealer, or the plug that the car would have originally been supplied with. Let's go ahead and get those ready. Once you pull these protective pieces off, it's just cardboard. You don't want to drop the plugs, because if you did drop it, it would be easy to bend the tip and mess with the gap. So be careful with these once they're out of the box. And there's the 4 plugs. Alright, let's go ahead and put on my gloves and we'll head back to the car. This isn't a particularly dirty job, but it's always nice to have gloves on. All right. Pretty straightforward job here once the coils are off. Pretty simple, so we'll just reach down in there and remove the plugs. So we'll start with this one, which is cylinder number 1. And let's get moving. On this car, the firing order would be, or rather the cylinder numbers would go from 1, closest to the timing chain and belt on this side, to the other end of the motor. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let's continue with this. Okay, that one's loose. Move on to the second one. Now earlier, to be sure that we narrowed down the problem to the coils, which are super common, or the plugs, I actually came in and replaced, reordered the ignition coils. This one's pretty tight. There we go. And the misfire codes did follow the ignition coils. I did not swap the spark plugs because we elected to do the plugs and coils together this time. Alright, that one's loose. Alright. So normally, if you had nice tools, the spark plugs would come out with the spark plug socket, you would have a rubber piece here which would fit around the spark plugs tightly. Unfortunately, my tools are not that nice, which is why I have this magnetic pickup tool. Using this, I can pull the plugs out. Yep, as suspected, so this appears to be an original plug. It's obviously very, very worn. So it's a good thing we decided to replace the plugs along with the coils instead of just the coils. Looks like same deal here, pretty much. Now this engine being chipped, running more boost than factory, we should probably replace the plugs more often. Can you see that? And the last one. Oh, it's not grabbing, so perhaps we just need to turn it a couple more turns. Yep, and here we are. Fairly worn. Alright, so that's the 4 plugs. So let's grab the replacement plugs and get to work. So again, this is a step you would normally not have to do if you had a nice new spark plug socket, but all I'm going to do is use my magnetic pickup tool to lower them into place softly so as to not drop the plug. Same thing here. This is probably an overkill step that you don't really need to worry about once the plugs are in the hole. I mean, you'd be talking about dropping it just a couple of inches, no real big deal. Alright, now they're all in their places. So we go ahead and tighten them. I like to get them all hand tight. First, make sure you're threading them properly. You don't want to cross thread this. It's an aluminum head, would be easy to strip. So you just want to make sure you're getting several clean rotations before you start to apply in a real torque. Alright. So, and these need to be fairly snug but not super tight. Of course there's specs on this if you want to do it by the book, but I've worked as a mechanic long enough that it's pretty easy to just do it by feel. So fairly snug. There's a crush washer at the end of each spark plug, and the crush washer crushes, as the name implies, as you torque them down, and you should feel a strong increase in the resistance once it's crushed. So if you have the feel for it, this isn't really something you have to use a torque wrench for. All right, so we're done with all the tools we will need. And at this point, you literally just drop the ignition coils in. Pretty simple. They go straight down. Just pull the wiring harness out of the way as you drop it in. And you just push them in, and it's that simple. I don't know if you can hear this, but they don't really snap, but that's it. And then you line the connector. Well, the connectors, all of them, need to be lined up, of course, and then you just push them in and they will clip. And that's it. Pop the cover back on. Again, you just line this up and push it in, and we are done. I'm going to remove this cap and align it properly just because I'm a little OCD. Obviously not necessary. And take a look in there too. It looks fairly clean. So I want to just line up this cap so when it's closed, everything faces the proper direction. I'll check the oil too while we're at it. Looks okay. Maybe slightly dirty. Maybe a little on the dirty side. So you could perhaps use, is this in focus? Perhaps use an oil change at some point, but not too bad. So we'll put that back. Now let's go restart the car and see how we do. Ah, sounds much better. Yep, revs up cleanly. Let's see if we have any new codes. I'll show you this process also. It's right under the dash. All we do is plug this in, and the OBD2 scanner comes alive. Literally just click enter. It's now syncing. Codes found 0. So that's exactly what we want to see.